Hi, welcome to FedScoop TV. I'm Billy Mitchell. Today I'm here with Mike Pietch, the VP and GM of middleware at Red Hat. Mike, how are you doing?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Great to have you here today at the 2017 Red Hat Government Symposium, talking all things open source, what you guys do best. And it's great stuff we've talked about today at the conference, but wanted to kind of jump into the whole IT modernization aspect of the federal government, and there's this major push when it comes to federal IT, but I'd love to hear how open source plays into that. We've heard about it from the Federal CIO Council within OMB last year. They came out with a big policy, but would love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, a couple of things. So in the area that I'm responsible for, middleware, right? These are the tools, the libraries, the frameworks, the integrated development environments and so on that the developer touches and feels and interacts with on a day-to-day basis. So in many ways, middleware is where the developer really sees and experiences the open source nature of what Red Hat does. So that's actually very exciting. And in terms of what does that mean for government, what does that mean for things like the modernization imperative in the government? So Red Hat has been in the middleware business for over a decade now. Red Hat acquired JBoss in 2006. So while we're most famous, of course, for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, RHEL, we've actually been in the developer side of the house for a very large chunk of our history as well, and that's been a great run. We've expanded well beyond that initial Java EE application server basis, which is what JBoss became as JBoss EAP. And I would say that in the first sort of phase of the JBoss EAP's franchise, it was really a lot about the way it manifested value of open source to the government as well as other sorts of organizations. Has been kind of a commoditization of that market, right? It was dominated previously by large proprietary vendors, and when the world realized that they could have the same functionality, same reliability, same performance at a fraction of the cost, basically enabled by the development model of open source, that was a huge disruptor, a huge game changer for the industry. So that was the first real dramatic, I would say, benefit and change that open source brought within the context of middleware in particular.
Sure. We like to talk a lot about the emerging technologies, how government's embracing next-gen type things. And obviously, open source plays a part in that as well. So I'd love to pick your mind when it comes to those emerging technologies. How is open source kind of helping agencies move there?
Yeah, so great segue into the next phase of the value that open source brings. Because while initially, I would say a large kind of proportion of the conversation or conversations really was about this kind of cost and commoditization. In recent years, the emphasis, both internal to Red Hat in terms of what we focus on, what we develop, and in terms of what our customers demand of us, what they're looking to us for, really is about innovation. So it's really transitioning from commoditization to innovation, because the open source model, right, the open source community is orders of magnitude larger than the set of engineers working in proprietary vendor shops. And so by sheer law of large numbers, you get that much more creativity, that many more ideas being tried, that much more trial and error, ultimately that much faster an evolution as things are tried and small steps are taken and evolution takes its course and new technologies emerge. And so I would say that Red Hat, as a sort of harnesser of that brilliant, rapid innovation that comes out of the open source community, harnesser of that and the mechanism, the means by which it gets turned into something that's enterprise grade, as they say, right? Reliable for large-scale mission-critical systems, whether it's government agencies, military, state and local. All of those organizations have mission-critical applications that they don't want to just sort of run on raw open source. And that's where Red Hat's value as, again, that harnesser of the open source innovation becomes really compelling.
Sure. What about containers? We hear a lot about them. How do containers kind of help agencies when they come to innovate?
Yeah, so containers provide a means certainly of encapsulating, as their sort of name implies. And furthermore, when you dig into the actual technical reality of what's going on, the container approach makes it much easier to essentially templatize different workloads, different subsets of the stack, if you will, different chunks of the stack, so that they can be replicated rapidly and reliably. And that is a major boon to scaling, right? So to taking an existing, let's say, type of application, type of workload, and enabling it to be scaled, elastically, rapidly, automatically. What containers have brought to the table has revolutionized that particular capability. Another important sort of dimension that containers bring to the table is the ability to essentially create, to modularize workloads into much smaller pieces, right? So if you look at previous generations of virtualization, whether it's the Java virtual machine itself, or most specifically, I would say the server virtualization, right, where you have an entire virtualized, x86 machine, right? Each of those virtualized workloads is fairly heavyweight, and it really wasn't amenable to a true microservices approach, because you could have a tiny bit of business logic there, but if it's carrying around this big, sort of lead weight of this heavy stack underneath it, well, it's not so micro. But with containers, where each unit of work has a much smaller subset of the operating system capabilities that it needs, you now are able to have truly micro-scale grained workloads and services, and have that much finer grained environment.
Yeah, and then to close out, you kind of implied a bit about the cybersecurity elements that open source, how open source benefits cybersecurity through the crowdsourced nature of it and all these eyeballs on a set of code. But would love to hear just a little more in depth on how industry and people like Red Hat can help agencies kind of improve their cybersecurity through open source.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the perhaps counterintuitive, at least at first, aspects of open source is you might think, oh my God, it's all open source. Anybody can see the code. Therefore, the bad guys can go, see everything they need to see to figure out how to hack something. But what's also true is that all the good guys can see anything that the bad guys try. And as it turns out, in a world of openness, of transparency, where everything is being rapidly tried and addressed practically instantly, you have a much more responsive overall mechanism to deal with security breaches. And I would say that's probably one of the most significant values that our customers have seen with Red Hat since the very beginning of Red Hat Enterprise Linux, right? The moment there's even the hint of a security breach, the mechanism is so rapid to address it in the open source community, and then productize that fix and roll it out to the mission critical workloads our customers are running. And that in itself, even all the other aspects, if you took them all away, that security sort of benefit of open source is in itself super compelling.
Absolutely. Mike, that's all I had for you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm Billy Mitchell with FedScoop TV. Thanks for watching.